Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the system design and the coding interview coaching session with my long-term mid-level engineering client, who actually received 2 senior level offers. In this video, we review my client's system design and coding performance for his actual Lyft interview. If you haven't seen the first video, I'll link it above. In that video, we actually go over his Tesla performance. I critique his approach and his answers and tell him where he might have messed up and where he could improve on. And I think a lot of the talking points that we go over here are very critical for being able to approach the system design in an efficient manner and to improve on it. Hopefully, you'll all learn something from this as well. So if you like videos like this, please give this video a like and subscribe and watch this until the very end. It lets me know that you like videos like this. And if you follow me on my socials, you can vote for what topic I cover next. And if you yourself also want to get coached for your upcoming interview, you can book me for interview coaching at echantech.com. So with that, let's begin. What the heck happened on Lyft and shit? I need to know. I don't get it.
Yeah, so with Lyft, it's kind of
they said just mainly system design, and so that's the system design I showed you, and we could go through it again just to kind of revisit. But it was kind of weird because I thought I had a good chat with him, and we kind of walked through how it would look like, and it was a working system, bare bones. But maybe there had to be more in terms of, he asked like how I would approach deploying it, and I said like, well, Kubernetes, you would just Dockerize everything and just deploy it on, create a Kubernetes setup. And so that's where I think he wanted to know more about, they use this internal thing called Spinnaker or something. And so maybe that's where like they were looking for someone who had experience with more the deployment side as well.
Anything else that might come out like you think was a concern? Or did they even tell you what was wrong?
No, it was just high level system design. And I asked them for more, but that's basically how they the recruiter just left it to me.
Yeah, I'm really trying to think. I remember we went through that exercise and it was a Wikipedia scraper thing. And so yeah. And I thought what you did was fine. It was fair. I would say the only concern is that you came up with a little bit of a little bit offbeat design with the saving the pages and putting it into a database. It's not typical, but at the same time, I didn't necessarily mind it. I would say the only thing that really comes to mind is either the deployment. I would say probably you didn't make the right trade-offs there. You kind of just like jumped onto it. The other one, that could be one angle. The other angle would be that, what's it called? You didn't clarify whether or not they wanted the actual page itself or they wanted the data from the page. That could be something. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be like, did they want the HTML page or did they want to, did you clarify like that expectation?
They wanted the HTML. Yeah, because they wanted a clone of it so they could view it locally or something like that. So HTML is definitely in it.
Okay. So did you also like address any of the concerns or any of the problems that comes with what's called your current system? Like, did you acknowledge like there are some limitations and what those limitations were?
I thought about like, we talked into like how would we kind of orchestrate our drones or our worker pool, right? Because these crawlers were going to be on people's devices, and how would we track a list of those or the pool of those, and like how would we handle when someone just turned off their device or something like that. And so that's something we also talked about in terms of how we would manage like WebSockets and like keep track of those and group them. So we went into that depth too.
Okay, but what about your own design? Like, for instance, you say, hey, we want to save all the pages of Wikipedia. there's going to be like some issues. Like for instance, your database is going to blow up very fast. Is there a way that you might be able to store the data more efficiently, like with some kind of tree or something like that, in order to reduce the amount of space that you're taking up, that sort of thing?
That could possibly be it. I
Yeah.
did ask about like should we focus on like he said like I first asked him like Wikipedia is huge, dude. Like how are we gonna just like approach this and he wanted to focus more on the critical path of execution rather than looking at the scale of data, because if I had, then I would have easily gone into replication and horizontal scaling and that whole bit of it,
Okay. So if you're talking about the critical path and you just said, hey, we're just gonna save and map every single page to the keyword, again, I think that's pretty fair. I think it's a pretty fair decision. You seem to list out the trade-offs. So I'm really racking my brain here. I think the only thing was probably the you said, oh, we'll just deploy to Kubernetes. I think that might have been like, hey, this guy didn't really do a trade-off on that, like didn't really discuss how we're going to deploy it, maybe didn't talk about like how developers were going to contribute to it. Maybe it's like I'm really grasping here. That's the thing. Like I without the feedback from them, I can't tell you what is wrong. That's the hard part here. So at best we're guessing.
And that's the shitty part, because like there's no information gain out of this. They want to keep it secret, but it was weird. I don't want to blame it on just like the fact that it's a sinking ship, or that the morale was down from the company or something. But I can say the role definitely was a heavy role for like, it was like an architect kind of role.
Yep.
So I think L4 definitely would not cut it for that. It would have to be L5, L6 kind of range, I guess. That would be my reasoning as to why a rejection would be that strong based on just system design.
Did the interviewer say specifically it was L5, L6, or did they say it's L4? Or
there was no indication of that. There was no indication of level.
Okay, try to get that information, because I think that's the only puzzle piece that I'm missing here for you, because I think you would perform very solidly at an L4, like maybe even L5 on a good day. But I don't, and here's something that I personally believe in. I kind of want to transfer to you, and I want you to pay attention to this. We don't give a shit what other people, like if it's someone else's fault, we don't care. It's not, there's a difference between fault and responsibility. It might be someone else's fault that something happened, but it's our responsibility to be able to deal with it. This is like what I constantly talk about in like the guide. It's like, it doesn't matter. We reduce the element of luck to such an insignificant degree that we don't care. We don't care if Lyft is a sinking ship. We don't care if the interviewer got fucking divorced that day. We want to perform so fucking well that they cannot deny us.
Right. So,
just thought I kind of just like
keep it objective as possible. Yeah.
Right. So our focus is like, this happened. What can we do to not let this happen again in the future? And so right now, again, like I prepared you as best I could for like an L4 role. So the only thing left I can think about is like, did I not have the right limitations here? Did we focus too much on like the nitty-gritty details? Did we why did I leave something out? This is the questions that are running through my mind. And I would hope that is running through yours too.
But to me, I just don't know. Like from what I felt good about it, and I've gone through other system design like interviews, so like I have something to compare against. It felt like the response was just very black boxed to me. Like I don't know. There's still not enough to be able to draw a conclusion as to like what was the detail that really hurt. Like not even just like hurt, because like if that's the case, like if it was weak, then it could have just like down leveled me a little. But this is like a straight up rejection, and that's why I'm just really confused why they would just pass on that. So I really don't know how to like make this productive in terms of like that relationship or the time I spent with them.
Okay, I understand. I think that at the very least, what we can do is ask the recruiter, hey, was this specific for L5, L6 role? And if it was, then that makes a little bit more sense. They kind of want someone with a little bit more experience who is a little bit more fluid and in the approach. And after that, it's like, okay, well, all we needed to do was really just have a little bit more industry experience, in which case is like, you already have the approach, right? All that's left is to fill it in with like, you know, the time you put in into your actual career. And I can be happy with that. I can live with that result.
At least that would be a conclusion.
That would be it, because, you know, there's only so much we can do for studying, but eventually it will come out, your own experiences, because your own considerations, the questions that you ask yourself to improve the solution with, et cetera, et cetera. That is all formed from your own career and your own actual experiences. And that part is something that I can guide you over like a period of like months or years, but ultimately that boils down to your own career. Nevertheless, let's put a pin in this discussion. We'll hopefully get like an answer sometime next week on this, but this is the only question left for me. After that, I'm out of ideas.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
So let's put a pin in that. So then let's actually look at Lyft. All right. Okay. So make copy of Wikipedia, serve Wikipedia pages from our botnet, minimize cost. Sure. Minimize cost. I think that's one that you might not have addressed, but let's take a look. So like web crawler root. Okay. You looked at the homepage. This is your actual crawler itself. Index all links, index on crawl links, crawl extract page it. You just save the text HTML. Yeah, sure. Storage of router to all links, scalable, okay, rate availability, reasonable latency, less than 5 seconds, sure. Crawler sends back links to a queue. Now I'm starting to understand. I can understand like what the heck you might be thinking. So I think like initially, once I did all this, I would have said, okay, well, do we want people to trigger the crawler, or do we want the crawler to run automatically? And so this becomes a little bit more complicated than just what you're talking about here, is that you have a read server and then crawler devices. You assumed that people want to, there's no link between the crawler and read server. So what I mean by this is that if I want to clone, we could look at Wikipedia locally, right? And let's say that I am looking for a page that hasn't been cloned yet.
Yeah.
So how do I handle that? Do I want to even do that? So it's like, does there need to be some synchronization between the crawler and the read server? Are we going to, do we need to make this a high priority thing? Do we even want to do this? Do we, otherwise like the read server would be just like, I'm going to hit an object store where I can't fucking read the page.
So here's how the execution goes. Like basically the orchestrator runs and basically delegates out which links to crawl on out to the devices, right? And then if the devices return links that have already been seen to the response resolver, then it's not going to push it into the job queue link, the job queue, and it gets stopped there basically. And in terms of triggering the crawl, the orchestrator basically sends it to the crawler. But the idea of it was like, or the backstory of it was that we set up like a virus in these devices, or Trojan, and it was just a demon running in the background.
I wouldn't describe it as a virus, to be honest. I would have just said, hey, we can have remote machines doing it. We don't.
Hey, that was his.
All right, whatever, fine. The thing is that what I'm saying is that the read server should be able to go into the orchestrator, and we're assuming that people want to be able to read pages. So the read server should be able to queue up a job in the orchestrator for whatever page I want. So let's say I'm looking at a page on, I don't know, computers, and your orchestrator has never run that job before. I would expect that the read server be able to contact the orchestrator. Orchestrator goes to the crawler device and says, hey, I need you to get me the page for the what's it called? The page for computers, store in the object store, and then send it back to the read server. Or in fact, maybe have an indirect reference saying, hey, read server, you're going to get back the actual Wikipedia page, but then we're going to queue up that job. You know, it's just that discussion I think that needs to be had. I think that's why I think you set up something very basic for sure, but then you also want to start considering like how this system is actually going to be used, not just like a task that no one uses concurrently. Like for instance, you have the crawlers running and then you have people using the system at the exact same time. Was that a question that you asked?
And so he said that it would just be me and you, like two people.
Okay, but that's still a exact same thing, because it's like I could still be trying to browse things while the things are crawling. So do I want things to hit a 404 if we haven't queued up that page yet?
Yeah. I think you're hitting it right on the head. That's definitely one piece that I left out, which was the user perspective.
Yes, the user perspective, because again, like the system is being used by a certain customer, and I think we might have talked about this before, but the reasonable expectations of the system is a factor that I think you left out a few times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck's your system supposed to do, and is it, and can this a person live with it? And that's the whole point of like the functional and non-functional requirements, which I don't see here. Like what happens if we hit a page that we haven't queued up yet? You know, do we expect to live with that, and why? And that's a point you're missing here. I think that's probably the first red flag I noticed. The second one is that I would also expect that if you're trying to save costs, let me ask you this: what do you think the biggest cost is here?
Storage.
Uh-huh. So,
storing all these HTML pages and everything like that.
mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that's where I proposed we would do some like sharding, and based on that, like we would have to know like what would be hotspots. We wouldn't want to.
No. Sharding. Let me stop you there. Sharding doesn't save you space. Sharding just separates the database. But overall,
well, yeah, then you go horizontally scale it.
No, but the thing is that, like you said, the problem is the amount of hard disk you're using, right? Sharding doesn't lower that. Sharding just says, hey, this bunch of data, we're going to put it in group A. This bunch of data, we're going to put it in group B. But if you added up all those groups together, it would be the exact same amount as if you had one database.
Yeah,
so
you're partitioning.
It doesn't like save your costs. All you end up doing is just having smaller groups of
cost-wise. Yeah, it's definitely perpetually going up.
Exactly. Isn't that something that you should acknowledge here?
Yeah. I think in terms of cost, I guess I wasn't thinking in terms of that.
I think it's fine that if you started off here like this is perfectly reasonable. The next step is like once you have the basic functionality down, is to well, how do we make this better? You know, what are my inefficiencies and how do I improve on that? It's a topic that I think we've talked about before. In this particular case, I would say, okay, well, we have addressed a very basic way of doing these things. But like you said, you've written it down there, minimize cost. Where's the biggest cost? It comes from the fact that we use so many hard disks. So how do we reduce the hard disks? Well, my solution would be, every single page looks pretty similar. You know, we have the same assets. We have the same chunk of texts for the HTML pages. So what I would do is like have a job that actually looks at non-used or least used pages and try to combine them with common syntaxes. So for instance, on an HTML page, there are going to be several elements that are going to look exactly the same, right? The HTML sidebar, the HTML, like the headers, the code for that shit. And so what I would do is literally just try to diff the two texts and see if I could come up with a common structure.
With a template or something. Yeah.
Exactly. And then based on that, try and fill and reorganize it so that you have like quote unquote this master template, and then try to apply a diff to that. So that way I'm only saving, I have a master copy of the quote unquote main page or whatever the main Wikipedia page is. Then I only need to store the diffs themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This would reduce my costs so much.
That's spot on. That's clever.
It's not really clever. It's like, you see how the logic came out? It's like it's like, what's the inefficiency? I'm storing the same amount of data over and over and over again. How do I eliminate that?
I think your just mind went towards the, so in my mind, I just kept the pages as a black box, right? And so you just went in and chose to dive into it and explore that more.
Yeah, it's just a simple question of what's the inefficiency, and the inefficiency is fucking costs. Like, what is causing our costs to go up? It's the pages themselves. Like, okay, how do I make the size of the pages smaller?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so I can understand now why Lyft wasn't happy with your answer. It's just like you came up with something very basic. Like that's like L3, L4 level, and I think it's in line with what we talked about before. But I think that there's like a lot of other angles that you should have acknowledged and considered as well. And I think that's what they were expecting. It's like, now the lesson to learn from this, one is that you need to consider things from the end user perspective, what constitutes reasonable behavior to the end user. So like we said, the read server. And the second one is that you wrote down what the requirements were. I would have expected you to actually address this. And you saw like the order in which I asked my questions, like what is holding me back? It's the same thing, the pain points problem. Did you, at what point did the interviewer tell you to stop? Did you run out of time? Did you, like what prevented you from really going there other than the black box thing? At what point did the interviewer stop the interview?
It wasn't stopped. That was where I was kind of just like, I was just running in circles myself, and I didn't really, yeah, I kind of just was out of gas after 30 minutes, I guess.
Fuck. Okay. So what was the circle that you're running into? Like, what was the pain point that you were trying to ask yourself, and then what made you run in circles?
I was focused on the execution path, and really just trying to trace that through in terms of how the crawler would work.
Okay.
So that's what I was just trying to dot my I's and cross my T's, and make sure that it's a fully end-to-end functioning system. Now that's where I just like started thinking about like statistics and all that and stuff. Like I just literally just lost sight of the user, like how the user, and so that's where I didn't know where else to think about or any other topics to bring up.
Got it. Okay, cool. We've identified our issue then. Perfect with the system design. I assume that Amazon kind of did something similar as well. We'll look at that after. But yeah, keep in mind, and this is going to be very, very important for you. I'm going to even write down on your fucking sheet. Keep the end user in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, big one. That way you have more sources of information. Like, what does the end user expect? And then from there, you would have been able to understand, oh, well, what happens if the end user uses the system while the crawler is running? Like, because again, you have 2 entry points. And the second one is to remember your fucking functional requirements. Or not, should I say non-functional? Yeah. Did I meet them? And then it's like, oh, minimize costs. You know, I feel like that would have been, that probably would have popped up to you.
Yeah, I definitely would have.
Okay. Yeah. So that is basically the 2 points. I think that, like, again, you ran out of gas because you didn't ask yourself like who you're addressing. And then second one is that, yeah, the inefficiency, you didn't address all your requirements either. So that's why I think they failed you.
Yeah.
It's like you came up with something, a basic solution, and you came up with it in a pretty logical way. I think what you're doing here is absolutely fine up until this point. And the question is, how do you extend beyond that? And now we have our answer. Think of the end user. Think of what constitutes reasonable behavior. Yeah, we're not, again, this is like, I think maybe I made you go a little bit too deep into the technical details. So let's try a different way from the breadth up, like the high level as well. So end user analytics is fine. But I would say there's still more functionality left to be captured. So yeah. I think this is okay here. Let me see what else that we can think of here. Yeah. A compression service is going to be a good one. Okay, so let's run with me on this. Let's suppose that you came up with a solution for the concurrent read and crawler situation, and you resolved the compression situation. What is the next thing you do?
Okay, so storage is not a limitation, or it's reduced in terms of the pain point. We have an executing flow, so we are gradually growing out our Wikipedia page locally, and so then, like we previously mentioned, definitely to address. We already addressed like if we hit a page that's not existent, like what we would do. Do you want me to go through that like whole path, or brainstorm other alternative things that we could talk about?
Okay, I think it's fair. Like, what happens if we are hitting a page that we haven't seen before? Yeah, that's part of the read server, and I think you would have been able to dive into that, how to, and this would get into a whole. Let me ask you. Let's say that we had a discussion. What component would you focus on? Just run with me on it. Just to pretend that we're back in the interview right now, and you wanted to talk about that. It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. So I mean, if there are cases where we're missing pages, whatnot, the read service is what we would definitely be focused on, and how it interacts with the orchestrator.
Okay.
and the job queue. And so if there's a link that's being queried, it's going to look into the object store. Path is not found. We know that we need to start this so throw it in the job queue. The job queue will do its job and send it to the orchestrator, push it out to the devices. Now that is like in whatever that execution lag is, that's how long the user has to take to wait and for them to refresh and see the page.
Okay.
But also there could be what if there's issue with so I guess that's one way of handling it. And then but there can be cases where we can get DDoSed or something with a page that we don't have, and then it just gets clogs up our queue until that page is generated in the object store. So that's another consideration.
Okay, that's consideration. Now let's remember the question of what do you expect from the end user behavior? I want you to try thinking about, okay, so now that you said that, how does the end user behavior play into all this?
Yeah, so the end user behavior really, from what we just described, would only need to just access a URI that is basically non-existent. If it is, it's going to pull from the object store just fine, and it's going to work as expected. But if it doesn't, then that get call is going to trigger some logic in the read server to kick off the job. And so what we would expect then is, hey, like, well, with this implementation, they would have to refresh again after the execution time, in some like maybe 10 seconds. So that's something that might be reasonable, might not be reasonable. And so the user doesn't know how long to wait. And so maybe there's a way to get some status update or a notification that this page is now available. You can view it.
Okay.
And so that would from the user perspective be end to end in terms of a solution where they run into an issue and it's resolved by the system, and it's clear. So that's one thing in terms of not finding pages. I guess if a user is exploring a topic, they're going to access similar topics and key terms, and so I would guess that it would be useful to use that topic as a seed. Like if a topic doesn't exist, use that as a new seed to start crawling from that page. And so then you could build out the pages adjacent to it as well. And so.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to put a pause there. I think I like where you're going with this, but let me adjust a few things. First of all, you said, hey, we're going to hold the user hostage until we get the page. That part I'm not a fan of. I'm going to tell you straight up. Because what I would personally do is literally just have it redirect to Wikipedia. I'm going to get the page back anyway, right? And then I can just like throw it into the parser, and then I'm going to return back the exact same thing to the user. You know, I don't expect the user to. I'm not going to hold the user hostage. In fact, I would say it's pretty unreasonable to hold the user hostage for such a page. I don't think the user would mind like adding another half second for the redirection, but I would say it's pretty unreasonable to make the user wait 10 seconds because we have a bunch of other jobs holding it up. So
how would they access the page though? Like, how would they know that it's available or something?
So for instance, let's say that we want to access the Wikipedia page for, let's say, the Google website, right? Oh, your email is showing, by the way. You might want to minimize that.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's say I'm going for Google, right? I'm going to hit my fucking local database for this project, right? It's going to say, hey, Google doesn't exist in our page. So what we're going to do is go to Wikipedia, get that fucking page for Google, and then give the user that exact page. All this is just HTML.
Say that again, one more time.
So what we're going to do is just get the actual Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
and then feed that back to the end user. So really, this just ends up acting as a proxy.
So, but like when GET request is made, like how would in terms of a push mechanism, how would we be able to push a page to them once it's ready?
No, we don't push it. We just hold the connection.
Oh, it's a long pull.
Yeah. It's just like, again, it's as if we went through a proxy.
Mm.
And so that way,
okay,
once you get it back, because you're getting the page back anyway, so then you just throw that page into the crawler or the job executor, and then just like it will parse that actual page for you. So essentially, in that case, it acts like a high priority. Now, the thing is that what I liked what you said after that is that, hey, yeah, we want to, it's not likely that the user's just going to refresh the page again. What's likely is that the user's going to follow those links. So then what we could end up doing is promote those links that are from that page and then put that in high priority as well for the crawler.
Yeah.
And then make sure that it's all breadth first search, by the way. But yeah, you can kind of see like how I was able to think like, oh, what is the most efficient way for the user to not have their experience interrupted?
Yeah.
And where you thought is
like,
like, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll follow.
So, and the way you thought was like, okay, well, how does the user serve the system? There's the difference right here, because the reason why I say you're asking whether or not the user can serve the system is because the system has its like quote unquote rules and the user just has to wait around them. It's just like, oh, this system is busy. Let me just wait a while. I'm at its mercy. Oh, all hail the mighty computer.
Yeah.
No. It's the other way around. The system serves the user.
Yeah.
And so the question
exactly.
is, how do we adjust the system in order to make the user happy? It's a simple flip of that. So it's like, okay, well, can we introduce a high priority for the end user? And then based on that, what are the end user's expectations and what are they likely to do? In this case, all I said was, hey, end user doesn't want to have their experience broken just because we don't have the object store, and the end user is willing to tolerate a redirection, like as if it's a proxy. And then what happens after that? The end user is going to click on another link inside that page, and we want to have that page ready for them.
Yeah.
That's why I said we can promote these links in a breadth first search manner for a high priority. And then we can do some more fancy shit with like predictive, what's it called? Predictive link text, like based on what has been popular in the past. We'll just promote those as well. Are you more likely to click on the first link you see, or is it like, are you more likely to click in the middle, et cetera, et cetera? Those are just like little gritty details that we can throw into the orchestrator to prioritize what links over what links. Also duplicate jobs, like what if we queued up Google twice? Is the job going to reject it? Or are we going to, and if so, if it rejects it and one comes in at a high priority, are we able to promote jobs of higher priority? You see like how I'm already starting to think about like what the fuck can go wrong and what are the consequences of every single decision I make.
That's the point I was going to make, which is like, at this point, I know how to build out a system for like a happy path execution. It's like, but that's when, like, once you have that, that's when the actual analysis and discussion starts. And that's where you can really showcase like how you could handle ambiguity and real case scenarios. Right.
And that's on you to trigger that, what's it called? That conversation. You need to get to a point, like you see how I did it like all very, very quickly, like was able to make the trade-off, like, oh yeah, this is like what's going to happen. Now here's the possibilities. And all this time the interviewer would probably tell me, you know what, these are good ideas. Why don't you write out what exactly is happening, and then we'll discuss. Like, okay, sure. And then I just like boom, 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 draw those lines, and then write those points on the side, I think. But you notice the difference between what you're doing and what I was doing. What you're doing again was like kind of slow, rambling, like trying to meander and figure it out. Like, oh, I guess we could have the user, wait on the system. And then for me, it's like it was very obvious that we shouldn't make the user wait. And how do we get around that situation? That's basically the difference between what you're doing and what I'm doing. I'm not saying necessarily I'm the right way of doing things, but I'm guessing based on my experiences with system design that this is like the expectation of the interviewer, that they were expecting you to be a lot faster with this, that you were expected to basically weigh off more trade-offs, and most importantly, you understood that the system serves the user, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So this is why I think you failed the Lyft interview.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay.